Thank you, everybody, and welcome to here. And today I will talking about the civil society development in China, and hope my English, understand my English will be a difficult job, and so please try hard. Yeah, hope my English is better than IVV, but somebody said I'm worse. And thinking about China, yeah, almost everybody will think about the left hand, the economy development. That is export, that's financial market, and fancy building in Shanghai, in big city. But the other side is we call it social development. It's sometimes in a poor situation. I have showed the IVV video. I want to show another video to you, just a little one. It's a more famous person. (2010).
Your Majesties, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Norwegian Nobel Committee has decided to award the Nobel Peace Prize for 2010 to Liu Xiaobo for his long and non-violent struggle for fundamental rights in China. The Norwegian Nobel Committee has long believed that there is a close connection between human rights and peace. Such rights are a prerequisite for the fraternity between nations, of which Alfred Nobel wrote in his will. This was the first paragraph of the committee's announcement on the 8th of October this year. We regret that the laureate is not present. He is in isolation in a prison in northeast China. Nor can the laureate's wife, Liu Xiao, or his closest relatives be with us. No medal or diploma will therefore be presented here today. This fact alone shows that the award was necessary and appropriate. We congratulate Liu Xiaobo with this year's Peace Prize.
Okay. Just a piece of information. Unfortunately, China is still in a most serious problem country about the issue of freedom of information or freedom of speech. But does that mean there's no civil society in China? I think no. Actually, I take an interesting picture last year in the office of USAID. Yeah, when I visit them, I found this banner in their office. This is a 1995 a meeting in Beijing. Why they keep this banner for 20 years? almost 20 years. Yeah, because the most important reason is for ordinary Chinese people. This is the first time we know about NGO. What is NGO? Why there's some organization do that kind of things? So USAID must fund that conference, but as far as I know, nobody knows about that. Yeah, it must be a big deal for them. So they kept it for 20 years. This is a beginning of the Chinese grassroots civil society, I think. From 1995, after 18 years, this is a number until 2012. There are 500,000 of registered NGOs in China. Yeah, we have 3 catalogs for the NGOs. The first one is member-based organizations. Oh, maybe all of you know about GONGO. That means government-controlled NGOs. That is, yeah. We use that for most of the NGOs here, because the member-based organizations, like association, labor union, that kind of organization, all started by the government or controlled by the government. Individual cannot start that kind of organization. So there are 271 thousands of these kind of organizations. And the second catalog is foundations. We have 2 kinds of foundations. One is public foundations, and another one is private foundation. Public foundation means you can accept donations from individual, every people. But the private foundations only can accept the donation from certain companies, business. So the public foundation, is also controlled by the government, most of them. And individual people cannot open that and apply for a public foundation. But people can apply for a private foundation. Yeah, this year, last 5 years, the foundation increased very fast in the private foundations. And the third one is social service organizations. I don't know if it's the same as United States, but we call them social service. They provide some kind of social service for the senior people, disabled people, poverty alleviation, and the environment issues. There are 225,000 of organizations here registered. This catalog will be the most grassroots NGOs here. And also, there are 1 million to 1.5 million organizations unregistered, all registered as a company in China. So the total number will be 1.5 million to 2 million organizations. So, in the rest of my talk, I will focus on the private foundations and the social service organizations, registered or not registered. So the foundation is a very important source of funds for NGOs. And the first foundation, I think, make grant to NGOs is international foundations. It's Ford Foundation in 1979. Ford Foundation is the first international organization operating in China after Communist Party takes power. Yeah. After that, we have some public foundations, but they are controlled by government. And this year, you can see the number. Every year, we have at least 14% increase of the number for the private foundations. So the total number until 2013 is 3,500. And the working area of the NGOs, that NGOs is for the social service organizations. Most of them you can find, they are focused on the education, 47%. They have some reason because in China, most of the private school, they will register as a nonprofit. So maybe you have a question about why there's so many NGOs not registered as a nonprofit. They registered as a company or choose not register. That's because we have some regulations for register in China. For example, if I want to apply for an educational NGOs, the first thing, I will go to the Department of Education. That means you must find a supervisor, a government supervisor for your NGO. They will guarantee you, and they will take your responsibility. If you have any problem, they will take the responsibility. So that's the hardest step for start an NGO. Nobody wants to take extra responsibility, especially the government. So if you can get the first step, somebody want to take your responsibility to be your supervisor, you will go to the Department of Civil Affairs. They will in charge of the registration process and the annual inspection. And after that, you will go to the tax bureau. The tax bureau is in charge of the tax exempt. It's very hard in China. Actually, I think 95% nonprofit cannot get that tax exempt. And also, I think maybe 99%, if you get tax exempt, but you cannot get your donor get tax deductible. So it's very hard. So that means if you cannot get the tax exempt and register as a nonprofit or a company, no difference. Yeah, the tax is no difference. And because the first step is so hard, so nobody wants to try that. But this year, from last year, I think, the government tried to get rid of this step. You can register with the Department of Civil Affairs. So that will be more simple to that. So after 18 years developed, I think there's an ecosystem of Chinese NGOs. Very small, but there's an ecosystem. Because we have foundations, they will give the source of a fund. The blue line will be the resource coming to the NGOs, registered or not registered. Also, the Chinese government, the red line will be the supervisor or the control. They control the foundations. They also control all the NGOs registered or not registered, they will know that. But also, the government will give some resource to the NGOs. They are trying to do that. There are some kinds of NGOs developed that we call that NGO supporting organizations. They help NGOs to do fundraising. They help them to do capacity building. So there are certain kinds of NGOs. So I call them ecosystem. It's a small system, but you must pay attention to the government, because in this year, actually 1 month ago, the Chinese government, it's a Ministry of Finance, they said they will contract $20 billion to NGOs for social service. That is a big change. You know, all the foundations in China, it's 3,500 foundations. They have accepted donations for 1 year. It's 7.6 billion but the government will make 20 billion every year. Why they want to do that for NGOs? So what's the logic behind that? I want to show you some, if we look back 60 years ago, when there's only government control everything in China 60 years ago. The demand is basic. People need food. They want to have food. And you will see, this is somebody knew that? This is a food stamp. Food stamp, not the same as the food stamp in America now. This food stamp means even you have money, but you cannot buy food without this food stamp. You can only buy 30 pounds per month. Yeah, because there's only that food. Can you see the date of this food stamp? It's 1990. Even when I was a freshman in university, I used that. I can only eat 30 pounds per month. Okay, yeah. So, but after 30 years, that means 30 years ago, the government fund is hard to them to provide all the demand, diversify the demand of people. They want to use some market rules. So the market will supply some demand. And after 30 years of market development, they found there's also some space for the most hardest works they will do, because the profitable demand will be transferred to the business. The market will solve that problem. But there's still some problems. The senior people, the disabled people, who will do that? So the logic behind that is, first is the government realized they are already big enough. They don't want to do everything. So they cannot do everything. They realize that. And they found nonprofit organizations may cover the shortage of these social services, but must be under control. So they won't give you money, but they want control. Actually, when I came to United States last year, I was impressed by this disabled people service in America. maybe 20 years ago, when people come to United States, they were impressed by the building. But now, I think the disabled people and some social service will create a big space for the nonprofit organizations in China. Yeah, because actually we cannot find any disabled people in Beijing or Shanghai, some like big city, because it's impossible for them to go out of their place. It's impossible. So the service is not very good. So looking for the future, I think the number of foundations will increase very fast, because the most rich people, they want to build a foundation for tax reason or for some other reason. But the private foundation will increase very fast. And like I said, the government will be the main source of funds. And the third thing is social service NGOs will be encouraged. But at the same time, the advocacy group, I don't know if it's right, will be strictly regulated. When I say advocacy group, I mean that kind of organizations. That means challenge public policy, religious natures, ethnic minority affairs, or the criticism of human rights issues. They will still be strictly regulated. But I think after 30 years of economic developing, I think the next 30 years, if we're looking forward, social development. That's all. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. If you have any questions? Oh, yeah.
I have several, but I'll only ask one. And then I'm going to challenge you a little bit, and with humility, because obviously I'm not from China, and you are. But I work in the area of civil society, and I have worked in Vietnam for 4 years. It's been a while ago, but Vietnam is, has a similar political and social system to China. When you started your presentation by saying in 1995, and it's in the announcement, was the first time that China as a society and Chinese people came to know NGOs. I would say associations of citizens, maybe informal ones, maybe formal, but grassroots local associations of peasants, savings groups, groups that exchange services, groups that protect villages, for instance, have existed in China as they have existed in most societies for thousands of years, for at least hundreds of years. The term NGO happens to be a Western term, so maybe Chinese people did not know the term NGO until 1995, but the citizens have always organized themselves to promote their own interest or the interest of people that they wanted to protect or further, have done it for ages. So I personally would be a little careful to say that that citizens' organizations only started in '95. I find that hard to believe. What do you say in response to that, to my counterpoint?
Yes, I agree. I agree with your point, because in China, maybe thousands of years, for several thousand years, the village is a self-control. Yeah, they control themselves. They have some kind of a democracy process for that. But actually, when the Communist Party takes the power, yeah, they also call the village, how to say that, the village administration team as a self-control team. They have some kind of election and voting, but actually, even now, they're controlled by the government. Yeah.
I'm not disputing that at all. That, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's just my point was, and I think the government, and I think especially the Communist Party, controls so much, but citizens have always found ways of organizing themselves around common interests. So I just think we need to be careful when we talk about civil society to not limit the discussion to the phenomena of organizations that call themselves NGOs,
Yes.
which is a Western term.
Yes.
There are many other forms of associations that are as much part of civil society, and
Yes.
that I think we need to acknowledge. And they have existed in many societies. Sometimes the Communist Party will say NGO is a Western term, it's not Chinese.
Yes.
And to me that's nonsense, because that's just a way of legitimizing control and dictatorial control. But
Yes,
we
yes.
should not agree with that form.
Yeah, I agree with that. Actually, I thought that the grassroots NGOs and this term is first known by the individual in China. Yeah, thank you.
What about if there's a trade union in China? I mean, a trade union congress. I mean, workers. Do they have a platform where they can air their grievances?
Sorry?
Will you repeat again?
Trade unions, like for example, labor unions. Do you have labor unions in China?
Labor unions.
Labor unions, yeah?
So are they controlled by the government as well?
Yes.
I see.
Unfortunately, yes. This is a big government agency, labor union.
That is your part one. That is the first part of the. You said 3 types of NGOs.
Yeah.
One which is 200,000 plus.
Membership
Yeah.
based.
It is, I think we should say government body.
No, civil society. I mean, civil society and NGO. I mean, they could be, because to me, I mean, I think the labor union existed far longer than the Communist Party. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So before the Communist Party, were they under government control? And now are they still under government control? And the trade union, because they're supposed to be independent organizations.
But they're mass organizations, right?
Yeah.
At least, but you're asking before the Communist Party took over, were the labor unions, and if so, were they already controlled by the government before the Communist Party? That's the question. So the question is, were there labor unions in China before the Communist Party took over? as a regime?
Actually, I might understand
Hard to explain.
Communist Party, they use labor union to take power, and then they control that. Yeah.
And I don't even know there was labor union before the Communist Party.
No,
Yeah.
I don't remember. I don't know that.
of course not.
Yeah. Yes.
But I think the early, when the Ford Foundation, for instance, you were saying that
Yeah.
they were the first Western foundation, right, to work on civil society issues in China. That's what I understand it to be too. They would, and the same in Vietnam, they would primarily be able to work with the mass organizations. The labor union, the women's organization, the farmers union, but these were all fairly tightly controlled by the Communist Party. So when you say air concerns, they could air concerns up to a certain degree, but never to really criticize. Please tell me if you disagree, if you have a different, that's my understanding. You can air concerns up to a certain point, but never to structurally or strongly criticize government policy in the area of manufacturing or whatever.
Please.
Yeah. When you say that the government controls the civil society part of this NGOs, and this year they have decided to give $20 billion grant or that. What kind of controls they actually put in? Is it a personally supervised kind of thing? or is it some member from the government go and sit in the NGO? How it happens?
Oh, the control of NGO. Is from here. That means every NGO will have a certain government agency. They take your responsibility. If you have any problem, most of them have a political problem, they said, and they will fund that. But after we get rid of this, they will fund the civil affairs, the Department of Civil Affairs. They will throw the annual inspection or something to control.
Where the grant is controlled, whether the grant or that money will come through civil affairs or from the concerned department?
Civil affairs. Civil affairs, yeah.
So that means they will control the stream.
Yes.
But I think controls probably, there are formal controls and then there are informal
Informal.
controls. Yeah.
Informal control is coming from Homeland Security. Yeah.
Internal affairs.
That is informal?
Well,
That is, people don't know that
they keep an eye on
outside of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had a question. You say that the government of China is planning to give out 20 billion to the NGO sector. I just wanted to have your take on what is the NGO sector doing, because this is quite a big threat in an environment where the government already controls a lot, and controlling the financial resources of the NGO sector is quite a strong hand on the part of government. Do you know of anything that the NGO sector is doing to prepare itself for this threat that is, especially that the foundations will not be able to give as much as government is giving, and so having that control, is there any reaction to this from?
Yeah, this is a great question because I don't know what's the preparation for that, because this is just climbed for 1 month, 1 month ago. Yeah, but I want to see there must be some in the near future there will be a lot of NGOs registered. They are coming from some people inside of the government. They will register for the and for the money. Yeah, I think so. I think so, but I don't think it's a bad thing. It's a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Would that not be just an extension of government in reality? Because if it's also people from the government that are opening the NGOs, then it's that informal control of the NGOs, and so it looks like they want to expand the NGO sector, but essentially they expand it, but they have a hand on it to say this is how.
That I think that is their strategy. But if you look back 30 years ago, when we come to the market, we have the same situation. Yes, at the first, the government want to control everything, but after 20 years, they realize that. Yeah, and the NGO, I think it's I don't know how to say that. It's a democracy seat of the whole society. Yeah, the decision-making process in NGO is different of the company or government.
I mean, just follow up what we were just talking about. As a regular citizen in China, I was thinking, whatever way they want to approach this, right? Like a government open an NGO or somebody else do it, and that's just the kind of a political side of how the government operates. But for the regular citizen, I think that's only the benefit when the government decided to put that much money, no matter what, and the social service is going to be improved. And my question is, so it's a good news for me to hear that government gave up that much money to improve the social services, but do you see any possibility in future for government to make a more developed or advanced regulation? For example, here, US, I believe when you build a building or subway or a new construction, you have to comply some regulations, for example, ADA, which you have to have facility for disabled, like those. But in China, I don't see a lot of that happens. Do you think like there will be any changes for the regulation in terms of the social services improvement?
And maybe following on that, even if the 20 billion is given for social service delivery, which is, you would think, looks very innocent in terms of political and social threat, NGOs can use that money partially to lobby with, say, the government of the Department of Housing to make more buildings accessible to disabled, or to scale up certain approaches that NGOs use in social service delivery that are quite different from how the government delivers those services. So we know that the advocacy organizations will continue to be strictly regulated, but there is a whole gray field between purely social service delivery and human rights related work that can still be about changing the practices of government in ways that are not overtly political, but are still structurally changing how government acts towards those citizens. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So that gray field is a really interesting one to explore for NGOs.
Yeah. If they are strong enough, they got more money, they will be stronger. Yeah. Most of them. Actually, in the big city like Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou, they have a pilot project that contract some social service to NGOs in the last 5 years. But it's just $1 million contract, but this time is 20 billion. Yeah, that will be big.
Yeah, so the NGO, who are they accountable to?
Sorry?
Who are the NGOs accountable to? Are they accountable to the government, to the donor, or to the people?
Yeah, that is a question. I think every NGO will face that question. And I don't know, in America, as I know, lots of NGOs also got funds from government. Maybe 50% of them coming from a government. So I think that will change. It's slow, but it will change. The accountability will be to the people, not for the government. But now I think it's for the government. Yeah, government wants you to do that, wants you to do this, so you just do that.
But we need to operationalize what that means, accountability to the people, because that's such a broad, empty term.
Yeah.
So what do we mean? Do we mean to our boards? Do we mean to our beneficiaries? And how do you operationalize that?
Because in China, I mean, they say that they are more into social service delivery, and it's based on a program that funds are released. For example, to build a school somewhere, I'm just giving an example, to build a school. So is that the community that will ensure that the school is being built, or is it the government that will ensure that we put up a school? You get it?
Sorry.
Now, for example, what I'm saying is that I'm just trying to say the accountability aspect. I mean, you are working in the name of a certain group of people. And is it that group of people who you should account to? For if you are working for disabled people, are you supposed to account to the disabled community you're working for? Or you account to the person who is giving you the money? Or you account to the person who is regulating you?
It's seldom only one of those, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think most of the grassroots NGOs, they will account for the beneficiaries. They want to do their best for the beneficiaries, but also they will account for the donors. But if the donor can understand that will be fine. But now the donor come to the government, maybe it's a different. But like I said, it's a same as when we marketalize the China. Yeah, the government at the first 10 years, government wants to control, but after that, they realize they cannot control. It's a system, an ecosystem, I think. Please.
Is there any indication as to which groups will receive money from the grant from the government? Are there specific organizations they say that they will fund, or is there? I mean, I understand the notification just came out last month, but they must have a plan of how to give the monies to different organizations.
Yes, yes. They didn't they didn't give us the plan, but I think the government will put most of the resource to this kind of registered social service organizations, but maybe they will give some resources to the foundations, the public foundations. They have built that. Yeah.
I have a question about the slide that we just had up, the one before this. So you told us that the government has just announced that NGOs in the future will not need that sponsor from a department like the Department of Education any longer, right?
Yes.
That's
yes.
very new information.
Uh-huh.
My question is, that was a formality, that was, you really needed that, and it was hard to get, as you told us. In the new system, will it really not be necessary to, in effect, have a government sponsor? Or do you really still need to have a sponsor in a person high up in a government agency, but only informally? In other words, the formal requirement may be taken away, but actually you still need a sponsor in a government ministry. Or do you think it really will not be a
No, there will be no sponsor, no supervisor in government anymore. But it's just for some of them. It's just for they have a list. Yeah. They have a list like education, if you work on education, or social worker, health, employment, something like that. A long list. If you are in the list, you can do that. But if you are not, that is another story. Yeah.
I noticed that of the 3 types of NGOs in China, foundation's number is dramatically smaller than the other 2 types. Why is that? Like foundation, the number of foundations in China is only like 3,000, whereas the other 2 like 20,000.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Actually, foundation is a source of funds. So in China, you must have, I think also in the United States, you must have a lot of money so you can open a foundation. So in China, it's 20 million renminbi. You open a foundation. That's almost free. If you have money, you can have a foundation. So that's because of money, I think. But for this, it's just let me say, $5,000 US dollar, you can start a social service organization. Yeah.
Another question is, do international NGOs in China go through the process of government regulation, including tax exempt?
That's a different story. no international organizations can register in China. All of this must be the board, the president of the board must be a Chinese citizen. And for the international organization, they just register as a Chinese office. They cannot get any funds from China. The funds must be come from abroad. Yeah. Also, like Ford Foundation, they grant lots of money in China, but they just have an office. They cannot do fundraising in China.
Do the offices have the same regulation as the other NGOs in China do?
He cannot apply, he cannot register.
He cannot register. Yeah, he will be most strictly regulated organization. That will be, yeah.
But it's interesting, you have, for instance, ActionAid in
ActionAid,
China
yeah.
is in China.
Yeah.
ActionAid is an international NGO that is human rights based,
Yeah.
but it's not a human rights organization like Amnesty or Human Rights Watch would be.
Mhm.
They focus more on social, economic, and cultural rights. And I asked the country director, now what can you do in China as ActionAid China? And he said, you can, within the margins, you can work on social, economic, and cultural rights as long as you don't touch on the hot button issues of religion, minority, and human rights in the political and civil human rights sense.
Yeah.
There are these gray areas where you can work from a rights-based perspective on what are citizens' rights when it comes to housing or healthcare or other social rights.
Yeah, I think so. The international organization must understand the bottom line of the Communist Party. I think it's a one-party policy. You don't touch that. You can give money for social service. You can teach them for voting or election in the village base, but not in the city. Yeah, just in the village. That kind of sense.
I think we have time for one more question before we'll have to break,
Oh,
although some
yeah.
might be available afterwards to take questions from everyone.
Yes,
Just one
please.
thing. There is a lot of difference between Chinese way of handling the NGO sector particularly. And like our experience in India with reference to the CSOs and NGOs, there are a lot of flip side of NGOs in terms of the malpractices,
Flip side, I think you
Fun-
mean negative,
yeah,
negative
the
impacts.
negative side of NGOs, not from the like advocacy, not from that angle, from the actual like $20 billion. It's a big amount. Whether any checks, balances, any control kind of thing is there from that angle, where the usage of the fund is properly regulated, as well as see that it is used for the purpose it is being given. We have got many examples of that. So I thought that whether you are also aware in China, the NGOs are indulging in the activities which are not permitted.
I heard some almost the same question about Iraq from our fellow from Iraq. Yeah, some of the NGOs they start that NGOs for the money come from abroad government. I think there must be some kind of these kind of problems, but as I said, there's a pilot project in some big city, especially in Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou. The NGO is mutual in that area. Maybe it's better than other area.
I do believe that the Chinese Congo, the Chinese Association, the Chinese Umbrella Organization of National NGOs, has a project now on financial accountability. There was this big scandal with the Red Cross, right, in China, and the abuse of money and so on. So the Umbrella Organization of NGOs tries to be proactive and say, let's put some systems and standards in place. Corruption, by the way, happens just as much in government and
It's a
in the private
Yeah.
sector as in civil society, but yeah.
Yes.
So I think there's the beginning of an awareness that self-regulation and setting standards is an important
Yeah.
part for the future legitimacy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
very much.
Oh, thank you very much.